in exchange, you will work for me. You will build all of this infrastructure. So, done. And at that point, we built and made live payment net rails in India, Brazil, Mexico, Guatemala, especially in the crypto rails.
Yeah.
And observation that I had was that existing infrastructure is really inefficient. And I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When we are doing fiat payments between people, because of the underlying infrastructure, which is like government-backed infrastructure, money was deducted from an account and it was not credited in another account. And there is nothing we could do to fix it from our end. We can just only ask the user to talk to your bank to do that. And I mean, that was the standard operating procedure. And because there was nothing we have control over at Meta, and it's just basically the underlying infrastructure is at fault. And the infrastructure is in general pretty solid. It has 99.99% reliability. But then at 100 million users, that 10,000 users that lost their money.
You're listening to Forum Founders. We tell stories of immigrant and first-gen entrepreneurs, investors, operators, and ecosystem builders. And on the show, you'll hear incredible stories that often go untold. With stints building products at Microsoft, Twitter, and Meta, Naga Samineni knows a thing or two about serving millions and billions of customers. Naga is taking all the knowledge of how to scale high-impact global products and bringing that to Web3 and the next generation of web infrastructure as co-founder of MetaKeep. Welcome to Forum Founders, Naga.
So great to be here, Andy. Thank you so much for having me over.
Thanks. I'm really excited for this conversation, especially because I don't think we've had a lot of Web3 guests on the show. So before we get started there, tell me more about you and where you grew up.
Absolutely. So I'm Naga. So I grew up in India, in Hyderabad, and it was pretty fun growing up. I mean, there's growing up in a middle class household. Like there is scarcity, but imagine India, for those who don't know, it's a place where you can find a sandwich for both 5 cents as well as $100. So this spectrum teaches you early that resourcefulness matters more than resources. Growing up, it was scarcity in general, and so as a quick example. I was always like really huge into science fairs and science exhibitions because basically gets you out of a class, first and most important thing, and second, you get to nerd out on things. And so it so happens that usually the projects that win, and I'm pretty sure it's true till date, the projects that win usually end up being the projects that spent the most. Lots of lights, lots of fancy equipment, lots of fancy sensors, and infinite amount of resources poured in by the parents. And you clearly know because there's no way a 7-year-old kid knows about anything about light emitting diode, much less other than the fact that something glows when you put batteries in it. As one major recollection for me would be, there's this time in 7th grade, I was one of the participants in a school-wide science exhibition, and for context, some people had parents who were architects, quite literally, and their exhibits to the fair had backdrops which were literal models of buildings. So imagine high-end architects, Zaha Hadid kind of types, and the models that they make for their clients are the ones that they bought as a backdrop for whatever they're doing. I think they were doing at that point light sensing, automatic street light turning off thingy.
Which is basically one big. It takes decades of experience to actually get to that point.
Yeah, to actually, I mean, I'm an adult now, and it'll still take me a minute for me to think about how do I want to program it on my Arduino. So, so that was the project, but there was a huge crowd all around it, and even before the science exhibition started. And while I was thinking of what I would want to demonstrate, It turns out one thing that I happen to know is that the tube lights have back in the day had a capacitor in them, which worked in a way where the gas inside it is ionized, and there is a bimetallic strip that expands and makes a circuit closed when the heat goes up enough. And so I had this idea where we can make a fire alarm of sorts using a used up tube light. So I needed a model house, and obviously I couldn't build the fantastic 3D modeling for real world things. So and I don't have the resources for me to actually go about buying lumber and then just do carpentry work and buy the nails, the glue, Elmer's glue, all of that you need. And so I just raised my hand and I just asked the school carpenter. So it's a big school way outside of the city limits, and it took an hour and a half long bus ride to get there. And so because of the distance, the school had an in-house carpentry shop. I just went to them and was like, "Hey, look, there's a science exhibition that is coming up, and I was." Thinking to building a house, but the thing is I don't know anything about the house building houses and wood and how it all fits together. All I could did at that point was using popsicle sticks and making model houses using popsicle stick and glue.
Yeah, and clay.
But
Yeah,
if you would help me, like, that would be fantastic. And not to add in pressure, but there's the leading guy who is doing this, and like, and I thought it was unfair because it's just like money poured into the project, and you're not really competing on the skill, you're competing on the resources. And so then I asked them, like, if they would be interested in helping me out, or first thing, if I could just pick up some spare wood that they're going to throw out anyways. And to my surprise, they love to help. And so so together I actually learned carpentry from
yeah.
them. Not only that, and I got a really good excuse to get out of attending classes, because I told them that, I was working in the carpentry shop. And I was like, what? I was like, and so I ended up having built a house from really good lumber, because tables are made from surprisingly good plywood. And I won a second. The first one, that kid won the first prize. But mentally, I won the prize, basically.
Yeah,
And
it made you almost like not afraid to ask. And when you said people were like, oh, they were very open to helping you out, it's
yeah.
probably because no one went to them.
No,
There aren't that many
so
people.
here's the interesting thing is that no one knew that they existed. I mean, everyone knew that they were carpenters, but no one interacted with them. It's just a department that no one cared to approach, because it was just that thing where it's like, nah, they work, they exist, but we have nothing to do with them. For me, it's like, I know every one of them, and I knew every one of them, and then I knew everyone who works in the garage of that the school had. We had, I think the school had like 10 buses maybe, because it was way outside the city, so the only way people can get to it is through buses. And buses needs servicing, so they had an in-house garage. And in the course of doing it, the metalwork guys were excited, and it's like, hey, do you need any metalwork? We can add a border to this house with metal or something. We can weld something together. I didn't have reason, but it was some of the best time of my life working with hard engineering. It's like, that's
Mhm.
basically I knew that things that I see, that I sat on, that I used, were built by people like them, and they
Mhm.
just put things together with their hands. So they were builders in the truest sense, and then I
But
got to learn from them.
but you didn't end up going into hard engineering, like you went to software engineering, right? And
Yeah,
then to
so
Microsoft
that
and
was
those
that was an
companies.
interesting journey for me. And in this experience, like, basically it taught me that uh, and I came to the realization that, I wasn't really the kid with the fanciest project, but one thing, the confidence that I got in me, is that I was the kid who could make resources appear. And then that led me to gaining the key to the departments, to the school's physics lab, so I can literally walk in and check out any chemical that I wanted, any physics equipment that I wanted. I took copper sulfate to my home just to copper coat a rupee coin using my electric wire. So it was like that was for me. I was building the atomic bomb. It was as significant for me. I was literally electroplating a coin. Amazing stuff. But yeah, I figured out that if I hustle enough and if I show people that I can add value to whatever I touch, people resources appeared. And I was the go-to person for people to for my principals. Everyone knew me by my name. I was only in the eighth class. I mean, there were 10th grades in my school, but people know your name. And if there was a thing that need representation from the school, especially sciences, and then I was the top pick. Uh, so yeah, that experience like built a lot of confidence in me.
Yeah, finding resources, making things happen without, with your own will or like your own knowledge or your own skill set is a very reoccurring theme or like
Mhm.
conversation that I have on the show. What brought you to doing technology?
Yeah. So, I mean, throughout my later career, after I graduated out of school, I got into IIT. At that point, I accidentally got also into architecture program in India. It's yes, one of the finest architecture programs, and I got I think 40 something rank throughout all across India, and I prepared for it for half an hour, and then I was like, that is amazing. I mean, this ability for me to like do hard sciences and putting things together with my hands, I think that's what helped, because that's what architecture and design thinking was about, and visualizing objects in 3D spaces. It turns out I was good with that. And then I decided that that would limit my exposure to meeting some of my goal at that point was that I wanted to meet and learn from the best people that the world has to offer. I want to learn about sciences. I want to learn about engineering, about building products. I didn't know what it really meant. And then, to be honest, I really didn't know what computer science was all about. People suggest at that point there was recession. It was 2009. Recession was just ending, and everyone suggested me that you should, career wise, you should think about doing hard sciences like electronics or something. And I didn't really understand any of that. So it's basically, look, does computer science allow me to, theoretically speaking, go abroad and then interact with a lot of cool people? Yes. Would doing mechanical engineering allow me to do that? From the limited people that I interacted with around me in my neighborhood, they're like, yeah, probably not, because but you do read a lot of people going abroad and then just working at Microsofts and Googles and making it big. So it's just basically, okay, if that's what gets me out of out of this neighborhood and then get me interacting with a lot of people, that's what I want to do. So that's why I picked computer science, because that was whatever it was, it has to do with computers, which I kind of liked. They're cool things, and I never had internet before I was in college. And so that was the first time I actually had a personal computer and a internet connection. There was a recurring themes where everyone were donating to some causes. So there was an orphanage attached nearby to our college, and a lot of people were donating it. I don't have the resources for me to give at that point, because again, I was still depending on my parents, and my train ride to my college takes 2 days, one each way. And so yeah, and I had to take my blankets and everything from all over there, because buying it over there was expensive and marked up. So um, so I started a business so that I could earn revenue, and that revenue is something that I could donate. That will be my money, and it was pretty successful. I was an affiliate for literally every e-commerce company that was propping up in India, and and they all wanted to work with this kid who was from an IIT. And for context, it's like, if imagine a Harvard grad or an MIT student showed up and then they said, "Hey, I'm doing a startup. Like, I need your help." You kind of want to help them as a
Yeah.
business owner. So that's the same idea that people wanted to help because they didn't know what I was doing, but thought that I was doing something interesting.
Plus, as
And
an affiliate, you were basically driving traffic and sales to them.
exactly. So
So
I
they're like,
closed a
yeah,
lot of
we'll
sales
take
for
it.
them, and my pitch to the business to the other kids in college were simple. Hey, you're going to buy notebooks and textbooks from these places anyways, so order it through me. there's nothing that you're going to lose. You're going to pay the exact same price, but the difference but I get a commission, and that commission I pay for charity on your name. And that was the pitch. So basically, I built a prototype of honey in a way.
Yeah.
And back in the day, this was like 2011, 2012, it took off. And at some point, basically, there are other interesting projects for me to work on. So I just basically ended up shutting it down. But I worked, yeah. So basically, it was, I didn't have things to give, so I just created things so that I can create new revenue that didn't exist, so that that is something that I can give. And same thing happened at Microsoft when I was working there. And for me at that point was basically, I wanted to work with really cool people in the world, and I took every decision that allowed me to do that.
One experience that I really want to highlight. So you went to Microsoft, Twitter, and Meta. At Meta, you were part of their experimental product, right? The DM team.
Mhm.
Can you tell a little bit more about that? Because that experience probably leads super well into MetaKeep.
Yeah. So on Meta, at that point basically I was thinking about I was basically shopping for companies, like what should I do in the next step of my life. After working at Microsoft, where one of my mentors I really looked up to and learned design from, they basically asked me to go move to California, find your people, and do something that of your own. And then basically, Meta was working on something really new at that point, which was payments, building into products that over a billion people use daily. It's like WhatsApp. And so the opportunity was, and the promise that I wanted from my hiring manager at that point was, look, I want to learn everything there is to know about payments and payment systems from the scratch. And in return, I'll do whatever you want, but I want to be on the front seat of things, because at the end of the day, you're an engineer and there's only so much you get to get the exposure for. You don't really interact with partnerships, product design, compliance, legal, all of that. You do, but very fringe basis, but you don't get into the weeds of how things work and how incentives work and all of that. And he said, okay, sure, I'll let you do that, and in exchange you will work for me, you will build all of this infrastructure. So, done. And so at that point, we built and made live payment net rails in India, Brazil, Mexico, Guatemala, especially in the crypto rails. And observation that I had was that existing infrastructure is really inefficient. And I'll give you an example. When we are doing fiat payments between people, because of the underlying infrastructure, which is like government backed infrastructure, uh, money was deducted from an account and it was not credited in another account. And there is nothing we could do to fix it from our end. We can just only ask the user to talk to your bank to do that. And I mean, that was the standard operating procedure. And because there was nothing we have control over at Meta, and it's just basically the underlying infrastructure is at fault. And the infrastructure is in general pretty solid. It has 99.99% reliability, but then at 100 million users, that 10,000 users that lost their money. And so it took days for people to reconcile. And then so it's, imagine someone is sending their life savings to another account and they were out of money, with which they could buy food for almost half a month, which is insane. And then on the other hand, there's this shiny experimental thing that David Marcus and other folks were building called DM and the blockchain and all of that. And I was mining Bitcoin when I was in college on my Pentium PCs from the lab. And I thought it was cute, but I didn't really, get that economic incentive as much. I very much regret that. But over here, I mean, for the first time, I saw that there is this new technology that allowed you to get around the inefficiencies of an existing system. And by that, forget about the cost that companies incur in fixing systems. Basically, and the support costs, it doesn't matter. Like, you make money somewhere, you lose money in support, that's fine. But most importantly, the people are having such an awesome user experience in using blockchain technology that it makes the older system look obsolete, right? And so basically, you have this new technology called blockchain, which out of the box, it just by sheer installing it, it solves many of the problems of the existing system, and it is cheaper to operate, it's faster to operate, and it operates without errors, most importantly. And the more people operate, the more secure it is, interestingly. To give a quick high level overview of how traditional systems work, uh, when there is let's say you're building an accounting system, so you would make a database deduction, database and update. And when you're working on a system, I mean, imagine this was back in the day. And so when you're working on a system that is split across the entire country, and it's a pretty big country, you have inconsistencies that show up, often very rare, very highly available systems otherwise, but there are some minor inconsistencies. They will eventually resolve themselves. We call it eventual consistencies. But in that time, in financial technology, it have serious consequences. And so things like systems just refuse to answer. There's no fault of theirs. They would, in their perspective, they answered. It's just that something happened in between when a machine spoke, and the communication got lost on the way. And with even with sufficient amount of complexity in engineering and some of the best people, you can only solve it to a certain extent. So what Bitcoin and crypto has solved fundamentally is that it said, look, what if we make it a fundamental guarantee that and then again, one other key important point is that in this traditional system, you have to trust everybody. So I have to trust this bank, and that this bank is being honest, and the other bank, that bank is also being honest, and all of these banks have their own internal ledgers, and there's interbank messaging, and all of them are talking on the same bandwidth. And what happens when some bank receives the message and then commits it but forgets to acknowledge, send a reply? Like, there's so many issues that keep up and prop up, and then sometimes it's banks, so they die, and then for many hours they don't work. And so when all of this happens, the users are the people who just get stranded. So blockchain comes up with an interesting concept. It says that, what if what if we built an entire system that is focused on the singular idea about moving value between
Mhm.
places? And while you're doing that, let's operate in a way where you're not trusting anybody, and you don't have to trust anybody. And again, this is one of those aspects which there's different opinions on that idea of trust. So the best way to think about trustless is not that you're trying to do something nefarious or do something that is evil, but it is that you are protecting yourself from errors. That's how I define trust and
Mhm.
protect confidentiality.
Mhm.
What I mean by that is, for example, recently there's been reports of foreign nations compromising some of the US infrastructure. And the government official response was, hey, try using encrypted chat applications. I think that should probably, hopefully, fix it. In the meantime, we figure things out, right?
Hopefully.
And that's so basically, it's one of those things where, yeah, existing systems are vulnerable, and the trust is not that, oh, we want to hide these conversations from the government. That's not even the point. The point is that we want to make conversations trustworthy and confidential, and no matter how important or unimportant the conversations may be, as a fundamental principle. So it turns out blockchains do a really good job at it. And how do they do that? They do that by, and this is the brilliance of Bitcoin and Bitcoin's original paper, where it creates a trustless distributed system. Distributed systems meaning that instead of having a centralized server, there's multiple people running their own copies of all the things. But amidst this global chaos, you can meaningfully work together and achieve a common goal, which is maintaining a unified common ledger of everything that happens. So if I, Naga, send Andy 10 Bitcoin, for example, then that means that there will be a deducted ledger from my account, and there will be a credit that will be in your account. but there can never be a state where it is deducted and not credited, because that's just a state that doesn't make sense in this state.
Okay.
So either everything happens or nothing happens, and it happens at a planet scale where you don't have to trust who is operating this infrastructure. So
Okay.
it could have been me, like for example, if I deduct it and not create your account. So let's say I'm the centralized party that is running. It is in my interest for me to deduct the show you that I deducted, but then revert the transaction back. But
Right.
then the genius is in bringing together all the parties where you don't necessarily have complete trust in all the parties. So where if you make a legitimate transaction, the transaction is final and settled.
Yeah.
So now what we have basically done by moving a traditional fiat system into a cryptocurrency based blockchain system, you have essentially eliminated some of the biggest problems of your traditional systems, where when there are multiple banks, it might be possible that some of the banks don't really exactly operate by the book.
Hmm.
They might not be 100% honest, or they might simply be lazy, they might be offline,
Hmm.
and operating poorly. But that's okay. They do not represent the network, and they are out of date, and no one cares what their state of the ledger is. The network keeps moving forward all time.
Yeah. It's like
So
it's like communal trust system,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And with MetaKeep, what do you what are you building? What is this like infrastructure layer that you're building?
Yep. So the single biggest thing that I noticed, and with my co-founder as well, is that there's enough networks on the planet that you don't have to rebuild yet another network. Or at least I didn't think that that was where my time is best spent. But my Right, exactly. At that point, it is our thesis that there is sufficiently complex technologies that was built and not enough people that are using it. So if and a lot of applications that people have built on it, what is missing is that connectivity between people and the applications that are built on decentralized networks. And so if we can, and our thesis was, if we can build a gorgeous user-friendly interfaces that allows people to interact with this new internet, if you will, seamlessly, then you can actually unlock a lot of value, not just for existing networks, but for new. You can literally unleash the doors on a new internet, essentially, and you get to do that, and that was very exciting for us. And in the course of doing it, we realized that the whole world is playing with the wrong playbook. So there was the Bitcoin that added significant innovation. There is Ethereum that added a breakthrough thing called smart contracts, and there's Solana, who said, everything that those guys are doing, but faster, cheaper, better. And every chain then onwards basically made incremental progress towards like the end state of decentralization technology. But we thought that you are essentially in a local minima of what you can build decentralized systems as. So with our experience building systems that touched 1 in 4 people on the planet today, and world's largest peer-to-peer file storage network, or social graph of Twitter operating at 50 million transactions a second, our thesis was, if we can reinvent the architecture on which blockchains are built and make that an open interoperable framework, then you would be basically advancing the whole industry as forward. And it's not just about us, it's every blockchain network that benefits from it.
And
And
that's
that's
because the companies who are working with MetaKeep to build their infrastructure gets to build it on the most up to date, the most user friendly for their customers, right?
right.
Essentially, that's the
So out
thesis
of the
there.
box today, we work with some of the largest blockchain networks on the planet. And we bring that value of making blockchains accessible and invisible to the end users. But what we have noticed, the gap in the market is that because of the existing architectures and on every network is being built, they lack some things that enterprises are demanding. At the
Hmm.
end of the day, it comes down to economics. If it is cheaper, faster, better than what I'm already using, it makes sense. So my thesis for blockchain was this: that there is this new technology. It is cheaper to operate because you just need to run a server, and every bank can run a server, and you don't have to maintain that, and it will keep running perfectly into infinity. And it costs less, never fails, and it just keeps working. So that's gorgeous, because there's no support cost, there's nothing, there's no complex infrastructure, there's no complex things that you have to maintain. So at the end of the day, it comes down to my design thinking through my journey. It basically turns on to first principles basis. At the end of the day, you get to do a very great job in convincing people if you show it in terms of dollar figures. If it's
Hmm.
cheaper, faster, better, you should use it. Doesn't matter what that technology is.
Hmm.
If it is easier to use, cheaper to use, faster to use, so you should use it no matter what it is.
Are those the use cases, like finance use cases, that you see a lot of your clients, or is it way more than that? And what are some of the examples?
Right, right. So that's a great question, because finance is an obvious use case that, okay, this is the one thing where you should be doing if you're not doing on chain. But it turns out gaming can be done interesting and better when you're doing on chain, because I mean, it turns out that's what got Vitalik start Ethereum, because he was I need to double check my notes, but I believe, if I'm not wrong, he was playing a game, and all of a sudden the developer decided to underpower all of the characters and then just basically eliminated. Yeah. And then he was like, what the hell? And then, if only there was a system that keeps running forever, permanent, and works out of the box, and I can prove that I own something forever. And he built that. So same idea, but in this case, if you can, now that things are relatively cheaper than what they were, and now it is unlocking use cases around gaming. So people are actually building gaming on chain, and people are building ticketing systems on chain. Turns out ticketing is a fantastic use case, because we always see a lot of fraud in tickets, both on the selling side, buying side, as well as secondary selling side. And So one of my close friends, he started a company called Tixbase, and basically his story was fantastic. He basically bought a ticket for FIFA World Cup. He showed up at the stadium. Turns out the tickets are false.
And it
So
costs
it's
an
like,
arm and a
what the
leg,
hell?
probably too.
Yeah. And So basically, he now heading this company who is the infrastructure service provider for some of the largest ticketing companies across the world, and that is built on blockchain. And I'm proud to say they're using our technology to power the end user experiences, may make it indistinguishable from their regular ticket purchase flows that they people are already familiar with.
Yeah.
But More importantly, it's not a problem. And and there's a lot of problems that are a lot of solutions that are looking for a problem in the space, unfortunately. But amidst those, there are several problems that need solutions, and that they have found unique solutions using on-chain as a unique solution.
Yeah.
And things like, for example, in many countries, this is a problem where, because of inconsistent government record keeping, and fake documents, and officers, like, being corrupt and all, uh, there is no chain of record on certain property deeds, and people just claim whatever they want and just squat and all of that. And so blockchain makes it impossible for someone to tamper with it. So it doesn't matter, you are a database admin, you have privileged access to a secret server. It doesn't matter, because your access alone means nothing. And So basically, now you're seeing this world where people are tokenizing, which is a Web3 slang for bringing things on chain. So you are now able to make properties on blockchain. So in that way, there is a clear provenance on who owned it, who owns it, and how is the ownership changing going forward.
Yeah.
And that is indisputable. because it is provable that an officer can't unilaterally change it. It needs the consent from parties and all of that. And anything that happens is recorded for everyone to see in perpetuity on chain. And so you are now seeing applications also where governments are building identity solutions that are using blockchain powered infrastructure. And we are working with some of them in making that possible. And at the core of all of this is this new revolution where people no longer trust in some fundamental properties that okay, ChatGPT says that they're going to not use my data to process and train their AI. Right now, the guarantee is that trust me, bro, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it. Whereas now it is in proof is in mathematics that I can prove to you that there's no possible path in which I'm able to override my claims and do with it what I said I wouldn't. And that is not just good uh, for it's not something where it says it's in principle it is good. It's all it's a philosophical debate where everyone should be living on chain, whether we should have the right to bear arms. Like, it's not one of those debates but in this case it is basically by having a trustless infrastructure, you're actually making the whole infrastructure more secure against people who really shouldn't have access to that infrastructure.
Because there are essentially more sets of eyes, like exponentially more sets of eyes onto the activities that's happening, right?
Yes. So basically, what fundamentally it boils down to the fact that making a compromise on this network is so expensive that it doesn't make sense at
Yeah.
all to participate in it. Because if it is one server hosted in the US, in the Bay Area, sure, you can have an army sent to that data center and just throw it
Yeah.
out. And that happens around the world.
And
But
you think it's more expensive than, let's say, hacking like JP Morgan, right?
yes,
Fundamentally.
yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because not only you would need to hack and then you're done, but you need to
Yeah.
sustain that hack in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Because once you change the record on chain, people will always recover from that. It's like, oh, looks like we did the bad merge, so we just have to go back and keep redo that. And so it just we basically wasted a lot of money for not for questionable return on investment.
Yeah.
So do we have the computation power to theoretically launch an attack of that scale which will disrupt the blockchain with
Yeah.
nation states? Yes, they do. But is that in their best interest to just basically disrupt all of that or today? Like, doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I feel like I have so many more questions around, especially
Please.
like Web3 stuff, Naga, but we're coming up at time. One of the things I think you think about a lot for your customers and their end users is user experience. And maybe the last question I want to ask you about this is I think about user experience on Web3 and blockchain stuff all the time, especially because, you know, I use it and every year I hear, oh, we can get to the next level of usage of like Web3 products if user experience is much better,
Mhm.
i.e. things like when you lose your, wallet or your keys, you lose them forever kind of stuff if you don't have a way to like restore them.
Mhm.
And those are like debates that are happening often. What is maybe a few thoughts that you have on what the user experience should be? Should blockchain and Web3 product be things like people are behaving the same way as they buy a ticket, but everything happens in the background? Or is it more of like a conscious user behavior
Mhm.
change?
I'll tell you. Yeah, that's a amazing question, and I'll tell you why. It takes me back to something that one of my most prominent mentors, like Ralph Groen, Master Ralph Groen, who is the chief of design at Microsoft, has taught me is that um, if the products are something that should be built around the users and not the other way around. So if the user is using the product wrong, It's not that the user needs to be taught, it's the product that needs to change. So for example, we see the doors in like in a lot of places where we push the doors that are supposed to be pulled, and we pull the doors that are supposed to be pushed. So uh, it is not it is not, it turns out it's actually not our fault that we mistake the doors. So if there is a handle, people want to grab onto it. If there is no handle, people want to push on things. So it's just basically that's how the user experiences at the primitive works. Is that when you observe people on what they're doing, what they have been doing, what their natural intent is, now you need to mold your product around that. So that's where we see that we made a lot of decisions as we built the products. And again, some out of coming out of our experience working for companies like Meta, where basically the world hates you that you exist. World loves using you, but then they hate that you exist. So every operation that you do, every anything that you do is under scrutiny 24/7. Even when there are no laws that you are breaking, people will find a way to create laws that you are thereby breaking and then shut you down. And so when you're operating at that level, it's simply not good enough to say it's the user's fault that something bad happened. It's not good enough to check a box and say that, oh, we are therefore compliant and therefore we meet all the constraint necessary for us to be a successful product. The real thing that we should be building the products is around assuming that the users are going to screw up. Because when you give an opportunity, when you give a lever, people will pull on it. When you keep a button, people will press that. And so the question, and again, that is where the philosophy of simplicity that even not just Ralph but Steve Jobs and all of those guys have brilliantly pursued and mastered, is simplicity is often the hardest thing to pursue. It's so easy to build the products complex enough that does everything, but then you have just opened yourself a million ways in which people will fail, and they will fail. And you're going to have one obscure user who has lost their account because they did that which they're not supposed to. And you replying and putting yourself in that shoes of the user, and someone tells you that, well, shit, you're lost, like, you should not have done that probably. And that is not an answer that you want to hear. So one of the things that is really important is empathy for the users. And that just basically comes down to, if you were on the receiving side, is that an answer that you would want to hear from someone? Not really. If that answer is no, then you should probably not do that. And that's why when we talk about keys, we built that infrastructure around hardware wallets as our inspiration, because they are the gold standard of the space. So when we built our core MetaKeep architecture, and in our job to service the different blockchain networks, enterprises, governments, our goal was, can we build this? And we had to fight with some of our clients that, no, this is not actually what you want. Because at the end of the day, someone is going to lose their account, and then they're going to blame you, and then they're going to blame us. And it turns out that is true. We have seen a lot of different projects where people outright call the projects as scam and abuse, and they went as far as to file police complaints against them, because they don't understand the concept that if you lose a key in a blockchain, you lose it forever. Because that's not how web 2 worked. There's no, if you lose a password, there's always a way you can call someone who knows someone who to get your account back. Right, like, if your account is blocked on WhatsApp, call someone, call a friend who works at Facebook, and they will be able to present your story, and you will be able to get your account back. So, and that's where, and getting this simplicity is actually incredibly hard. Because in order to do that, turns out one thing that my cheat code is basically being resourceful and emulate scarcity, live in scarcity. So if you are, and so we are valued, and we have like over half of our pre-seed funding still in the bank, and we have made pretty good traction. But the key point is that we spend every day like as if it's basically we are running out of money. And because uh, if you live like that, someday it's probably going to be true, and you would have made decisions that are in your clients and your users' best interest, and you're not spending your time building products that don't make sense. And that's why when we build our products, like our offerings are pretty lean, and it's kind of like in and out burger. It's a very limited offering, but there's line out of the street across 2 blocks.
Yeah. And you guys do it super well. And so the closing question I want to ask is, because you've seen all these products that affect billions of users, and now you are with MetaKeep embarking on this journey where it's like the next wave of the internet. Um, there must be a lot of things that you're optimistic about. So I want to ask you, Naga, like, what are you optimistic about?
So personally, what gets me super excited is that I get to wake up and do the best job of my life. And so all my life has been mentally, I've always been at school. Like I graduated from college and I went to work, but for me, mentally at that point, I was there to learn, and that was what I pursued. I begged the chief of design, Ralph Groen, to just teach me about product design. It was very interesting stories around me having to prove that I'm worthy to be, even tutored, and yeah, then and that rolling on to working at Twitter and working at Meta after that, and just seeing this evolution grow, this industry evolve. In all of this time, basically I get to bring the learnings that I have learned through all of my life and apply it. So Silicon Valley, I think, and running a startup, it's the world's best MBA, as I would put it, because you actually, when you actually making that first sale, you would have mastered like everything that is to need to know about running a business. You had a company, you are doing accounting, you're doing payroll, you're thinking about compliance, you're thinking about international taxes, all of that, and it is very humbling to realize that just a few years ago I was in my dorm in my college watching The Social Network and thinking to myself, I want to do that. Like, I want to be that guy, who starts a company in Silicon Valley. So that's where, like, location is really special for me, is because, like, this is where I wanted to be, and this is where I wanted to. And another thing is I get to work with friends, and some of the best people that I would want to, I actually wake up in anticipation that, okay, I'm going to do something amazing, I'm going to have these discussions with these people, and that's basically, I look forward to waking up tomorrow and the day after. And uh, and every day is a learning, in that a lot of things happen externally, some of things that influence you, some of things that don't, but nonetheless, it turns out, when you're working in cryptography, a lot of things, like the new internet is being built on cryptography, and so everything is relevant to you. It's both scary and interesting, and so that's what gets me excited, honestly, and keeps me up.
I love it. This is a full circle from the beginning of the conversation where you're saying resourcefulness, finding ways, working with the best people, and you're living that. So, if people want to reach out to you, learn more about MetaKeep, how can they do so? Where do you want to send them?
Yeah, so MetaKeep, naga at metakeep.xyz would be my email. And I love when, I'm usually super available, like, for customers, and many of them just directly hit me up on the phone, like, hey, we're thinking about doing this new thing, like, what are your thoughts on it? So it's like, we are everywhere, and we want to, one of the things that I want to, I'm take incredible pride in doing, is bringing customer support and product support to the point where it resembles Amazon in Web 2. Amazon has been the gold standard of customer support, and every time you interact with the customer support executives, and I want to emulate that, and that means uh, bringing empathy to the people and building products around people, not the other way around.
Mhm.
And like going above and beyond, like, and advising people of, like, how their industry might look like based on what you see on the field and how you see things are evolving on your end. And yeah, so I think that's like, that's one of the things that we do, like, we love to meet.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being on Forum Founders, Naga.
Thank you so much for having me, Andy. Again, I really appreciate you. Thank you for taking time.